this is Trish, and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Mike, and he has been in the classroom for 30 years. He's recently retired, and he's here to tell us all about the changes that he has seen in the past 30 years. And I think you will find this topic very fascinating. So, Mike, let's go ahead and dive in. Can you just tell us, why did you initially want to become a teacher?
First, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I commend you for your wonderful program. You provide such a forum for people to be honest, and that's really nice to have. I got into teaching in 1994. I'm originally from Uruguay. My family and we got here in 1977. And ever since I was a kid, I loved words. I loved language. I speak Spanish, of course. And when I got to college, I was at first undeclared, and I was looking at some of the business courses, and it seemed to be that many people didn't want to be there. You know, they were just going through the motions. You have to remember, this is 1986, and everybody was in Wall Street mode. I think the majority of the majors were all finance, marketing, accounting. So when I declared my major in English, I was totally in the minority, but I found that I love those literature courses. I thought that reading was the most wonderful thing that a person could experience, because you learn so much if you have the initiative to do it. So I finally got into this one class called Latin American Literature with a fascinating professor. He had a double doctorate in comparative literature. He was from Albania. He taught in Italian, Spanish, and English. And I was in his class, and we had to do this presentation. And I went up there, and after it was done, he came up to me and said, "You know, you really have a great presence up there. I like the way you analyze the literature. You have a command of the language and so on." And I couldn't believe that he was actually impressed with something that I was doing. And he said, "You should be a teacher." So, you know, I finished my major in English. I had some writing things that I was doing at the time. I had done an internship through the college for an insurance company. Boring writing, but it did teach me how to be precise with how I speak and write so it was a great experience. And then I was working for this software company. They had in-house newsletters and things like that. So I did get my degree first in English, and then I went back and I got my teacher certification through the traditional route. My first job was in 1994, I believe. Yes, in 1994, I started working, and I started teaching 8th grade. And I had about 27 8th graders. And I remember my cooperating teacher had told me, if you could teach 8th grade, you can do anything, because they could be rather challenging. So I was there for 2 years. And at that time, they were, you had the sense that it was more of a supporting atmosphere. So that when you went into teaching, they were glad to have you. I think that gradually changed over the years. I don't know if you want me to start talking about that, but I worked there for 2 years. It wasn't a bad experience, but I only had one section, and it was really far from my house. The commute was a bit of a challenge. So I thought that I would like to teach other sections, maybe higher grades, so I can get more into the literature. So I looked closer to me, and I got a job. So I spent 2 years in that first school, and then I did 27 years in that second school. And then when I retired, I got a call from a friend who said, "Hey, would you like to work in a private school, give it a shot?" And I did, just out of curiosity. And then, after 30 years, I figured, okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to a lot of veteran teachers, and they talked about how the early years were really quite nice, that they had a lot more freedom in their classrooms, that kids were better behaved, parents were more cooperative, and they slowly started to see things change for the worse. Was that your experience? Just kind of walk us through that.
It's an excellent question, and it's a nuanced question, because it's never one thing. Unfortunately, in education, and in the culture in general, we make the mistake of thinking that everything has one reason. But it takes time to think about what actually has happened. In terms of the early days, you have to remember that you didn't have the internet as pervasive as you have today. So the schools were getting some computers, but they still had that computer room, right? So the technology was very much under control. So when it comes to the students, then you still had the freedom to teach the class in the way that you wanted to teach it. And I don't know if you agree, but when you trust someone, or when someone feels trusted, let's say that you hired me to be a teacher, and I know that you believe in whatever approach that I have, that you've observed me and you're satisfied with what I can do, you've determined that I am competent, I have the credentials, then your job is to cultivate my competence further, right? So that if I feel that way, if I have that kind of initiative, then I will be more likely to devote myself to the profession. I think what you see now with all of the turnovers and people coming and going, there is no opportunity to develop the sort of continuity that would make you a better professional. And I think that's by design. But I don't know, would you like me to talk about how teachers felt in the early days, or is there?
I'd love that.
Okay, so in the early days, even though there was still a lot of bureaucracy and we all faced that, many of the older teachers would say, hey, we still have our classrooms. I close the door and I still have the prerogative and the purview to approach my subject in the way that I'm passionate about. Now, I've always felt that it's more important to be passionate about your subject. I'm not of the opinion that teachers should try to establish a relationship to be liked in any way. I don't believe that's your job. Your job is to be committed to the discipline. And I think if you're honest about that and you're passionate about that, it's contagious and people will see it. On the other hand, if you want to be liked, then you give the students a lot of leverage. If you're trying to pander to them, then they will see that. And then if there's something you do that they don't want to do, they will use that against you. I've seen that with many teachers. And in the most awful cases, I saw one teacher in particular who was on a first name basis with students, which I thought was completely inappropriate. But going back to the environment that you could create within the classroom, that gradually began to change. And one example would be with professional development. I remember in the early days, say like to the late 90s, if you were encouraged to pick your own professional development. So in the second school that I was at, we used to go to the Dodge Poetry Festival, which was really great. We would take the kids there. We would go there ourselves. And I met these amazing poets. Yusuf Kamenyaka was one of them. He teaches at Princeton, and he had a Pulitzer Prize for one of his books, Neon Vernacular. And after one of his readings, I hung out with him for a while and we talked, and I could bring that back to the classroom. I could bring back his poems. I saw Gwendolyn Brooks once upon a time there. Another professional development that we did was we went to Kane University. We met Walter Dean Myers. He's a young adult novelist. We had a National Writers Alliance with different universities. This was in the early 2000s. The whole plan behind that was that high school teachers would get together with college teachers and talk about some of the challenges they face, and we would debate. And this was great because I really considered it to be professional development. I was the advisor to the school newspaper. And when I first got it, it was, when you get an activity that's just dumped on you and you don't know what you're doing. That happened to me. I had writing experience, but now I had to run the school newspaper, and it felt like a bit of a challenge. And where I was printing it, it was costing so much money, and it wasn't even computerized. Finally, I picked one professional development that involved the Garden State Scholastic Press Association. I was there. I met with other experienced advisors from the state. I told one woman, I'll never forget, she was working in Newark, and I said, yeah, I'm paying like $600 to get this newspaper printed. And she's like, oh no, I know this company, and you have to talk to this person. He works with schools. And next thing you know, I was able to computerize the paper, use some software platforms, and print it. And so after, say, 2005 or so, all of that disappeared. And a lot of it is because you have to remember, when I started working, I felt like the new guy for at least 10 years. And that's because most of my colleagues had 35 years, 40 years of experience. That was normal then. If you had a supervisor, your supervisor didn't just go to get a master's for 30 credits and come back with no experience to be your supervisor. When you had a supervisor then that person had been and was still in the classroom for like 25 to 30 years. It was a whole different mindset. Once the managerial corporate style administrators came in around 2005 to 2010, I'm talking about the pencil pushing bean counter types. It was all about not not what you needed as a teacher, because if you had experience as a teacher and you could select, hey, I could get this professional development, or I can introduce this author, I can tell the kids, hey, Walter Dean Myers takes a year before he decides to write a novel. I remember telling the kids how he would just do all these different outlines, and he would people from magazines, and he gave this whole lecture about how he had to see the character and get an understanding of who he was. And he underwent all this psychological preparation before he even wrote anything. And you know how these kids are. They want everything to be instant. And this was great to show them how a professional novelist has to be so careful, and how writing is not about the outcome. It's a continuous process. And for me, that's great as an English teacher. This is what real writing is, right? It's not about just turning something in because you want a grade. Well, all that went away, and then they started to introduce their agenda, right? So that if they wanted something to be covered by the teachers because they felt that was important, it could involve some kind of trend that they had read about in academia, but its relevance to the classroom is not really that clear. I'll give you one example that I think many people can relate to, which began to happen rather frequently. The whole mindfulness approach. I don't know if you've ever been through one of those. Okay.
Yes.
So in my school, we had about 3 presentations related to that on how to breathe by the same presenter. And she was a friend of the assistant superintendent. I'm sure it was just a coincidence, though. I'm sure she was hired 3 times. That's just the way the roulette was spinning. But there's a wonderful book called McMindfulness by Ronald Purser. He's a professor from California. And I believe he also studied Buddhism, and he was an ordained monk. And in his book, he talks about where that concept comes, within the Buddhist tradition and what it represents. And then he discusses how that was appropriated by the Silicon Valley types who wanted to make their workers feel as though everything was under their control. Change your thoughts, change the world. It's not that you're getting lower pay. It's not that you're working more for less money and little benefits. You just have to change your perspective. And I find that to be rather pernicious. So in his book, McMindfulness, he traces the genealogy of this whole mindfulness approach and how it made its way through so many of the corporate seminarians, right? Because again, if you have to fire me, then you don't want to say, hey, you're fired. You want to say, oh, Mike, this is a wonderful opportunity. Think of this as life reaching out to you. If you were to just adjust your perspective, and that is the most pernicious form of gaslighting, as the saying goes. So I noticed that started to work its way into the school systems, where you would get these people who had experience in the real world, as they would say, which to me has always been an insulting concept. I mean, schools are part of the real world, right? In fact, we're a reflection of everything that's wrong in the real world, right? All the problems that we have, all the challenges that we face, all the things you expect us to fix are part of the real world. But often these speakers would come in and lecture us for 2 hours, and you could just see that nobody was buying into it, right? When the phones came along, you could see the teachers on their phones, or they were grading papers, and I thought, wow, that's one big change. So the other change, I think you asked me before about the unions. Now, I really don't want to say anything too broad about unions, because I do believe that experiences vary from district to district. I've known teachers in other districts where they've told me stories, oh, wow, your union supported you that way. That's great. But so it really depends on where you are. But you have to consider the following, that a union is only as strong as its workers. And how do workers get strong? They build solidarity. How does solidarity get built? You have to have trust. So let's say that you and I are in the same school district. If I just have a year in and you have a year in, it's going to be pretty difficult for you and I to trust each other. We may say good morning. We may say hello. We may even strike up a friendship and get along right away. But I know that if you've been there 15 years and I've been there 15 years, it's easier for us to trust each other. I know Trish is going to be in the same building. So we are more likely to be courageous with an action and to have that kind of solidarity that makes a union a union. That was far more possible in the early days by virtue of the fact that the teachers had the experience and they were in the same building. So I say this because I used to see actions by the union membership when I started. I stopped seeing that probably in the early 2000s. And then gradually it just became more about salary negotiation. Now, there's a concept, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called business unionism. Business unionism is where the unions get convinced into thinking that their only function is to negotiate a better salary and to keep the peace. Don't be so confrontational now. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I've had many colleagues who have approached the union and asked for certain things, and they've been told that. But the reality is that by its very definition, by the whole premise of a union is to be diametrically opposed to the interest of management. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be diplomatic or that you have to be impolite or unprofessional. On the contrary, but that has to be out in the open. We have these interests, you have those interests. I think that with the years, the erosion has been obvious. So that if you go to a union member, they'll tell you, oh, we negotiated 1.5% raise. But I'm sure, as many of your guests can verify here, it's not all about the salary. It's not all about the salary at all. It's about the working conditions, right? That's really what's making people leave. Now, just to give you an example that I just heard about last week, in Paterson, New Jersey, they are short 150 teachers, right? And they are actually signing people on at over $60,000 because they just can't get. A local TV station did a segment on this shortage, as they call it. And the most telling part of the whole thing is that not one teacher was interviewed. They talked to the local politician, they talked to the administrator, but you would think that they would ask a teacher, hey, what's going on here? How come teachers aren't working here? What? No. And then they closed the segment with a private company that was, promising or offering distance learning to the district, where they can put all these students in a classroom, and they have a company that runs this distant learning. And then I guess you have some kind of monitor. So that's not a society that values teachers at all. That's a society that is looking to just diminish the role of a teacher insofar as the subject and the discipline is concerned. Now, teachers are tasked with everything else, and that's another thing that has changed. So take Columbine, which happened in 1999. After that, you saw more of the security measures being implemented. And then when 9/11 came along, after that tragedy, you had all of these additional surveillance cameras and all that stuff going on. Even the language itself, which I was always sensitive to. I think when I responded to your email, I quoted Orwell, where he said that to see what is directly in front of one's nose requires a constant struggle, a constant effort. And he's right. And I noticed it with the language, and it's really fascinating. You get all this paramilitary vernacular. So, for example, there weren't hall monitors anymore. You had task forces and crisis teams, and they secured the perimeter, and they had walkie-talkies. Even the school philosophy became a mission statement. And we didn't have a meeting. You were debriefed and deployed. And I'm like, I used to kid with my colleagues, like, man, pretty soon we're going to come to work rappelling from a helicopter. So I understand it's a crazy world, and I understand that many awful things have happened, but you still need to think. And I don't think that has happened at all. So now that we look back 25 years since, we've seen so many of these awful, awful incidents, and we've invested all this money in surveillance. And what do these cameras do? I mean, many of those students who acted out and committed their crimes, they were supposed to be there to begin with. So even in Columbine, the cameras just filmed the perpetrators committing their crime. So after all this year, all this investment, all these drills that we have to do, we look back, and I don't think we've accomplished much. I don't think we've actually addressed the issues that need to be addressed. All we have are thoughts, prayers, candles, and teddy bears. Well, maybe not thoughts. I don't see a whole lot of thinking going on.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was amazing. I'm curious, kind of on the same topic, how have you seen programs and initiatives and maybe packaged curriculums make their way into the classroom as mandates? And How did that change from the early years where, like you said, you could organically pick what novels you wanted to teach from, what instructional strategies that you wanted to use? How have you seen that morph over these past few decades?
Well, the entire history of education is prone to trends that come and go. So when I was in college, whole language was everything. Whole language and portfolio. So when I got my first job, actually my second job, they were very much into portfolios. Oh, you can't correct a comma. That stifles creativity. There was that approach. And I always thought that you can have a portfolio and you could also correct a comma. Why is it that we have to marry ourselves to one technique? Do we go into a carpenter shop and say, you will use the hammer from now on? It's absolutely absurd. When you apply what we see in education to any other field, you see how absurd it is. Take experience. People will brag about, say, a mechanic who has a lot of experience. I've been going to him for 30 years, they'll be happy. Or if you need surgery, do you want the surgeon who has 20 years of experience, or do you want the surgeon who has some exciting new ideas? No, you're taking the experience, right? I would, right? With teaching, it's the other way around. With these dinosaurs, get them out of there, So I definitely saw that. So this is what happened with the portfolios. And I don't know if you remember, have you ever heard of the whole portfolio approach?
Yes.
You remember that it incorporated a reflective essay?
I think there's different kinds. Ours was more of, it was put upon the teachers basically to say, you need to create a portfolio proving what you've done for the entire school year.
Oh, okay. See, again, it was a tool of accountability for the teacher. When I did the portfolios, it was more for the students, not for myself. So what we were supposed to do is collect their work. And I've always done this in one way or another because I would have them do some revisions. I wanted them to address the writing that they needed to revise and so on. But in those days, the whole point was, let's say you're in the class, Trish, all the assignments that I give you for your portfolio, you put them in there. And at some point in the marking period, say, you were supposed to look over all of your writing and write a reflective essay or a reflexive essay, because they didn't know what reflective meant. They often said reflexive. Now, the problem with a reflective essay is that in order to have a reflective essay, you also have to have other essays. And if you don't have other essays, you can't write about it. So one of the things that started happening was that there was a huge inconsistency among the different levels. So by the time 2000 rolled around, portfolios out. No more portfolios. And then we had literature circles. And then literature circles were about, and you could do a great job on them. And some kids are perfect for that activity. But again, it doesn't work with everybody. And I'll never forget how I used to do lit circles on Fridays because I really wanted them focused. I would give them different roles. You're the illustrator, perhaps. You do symbolism, you do vocabulary. And I would walk around and I had these different groups. I'll never forget this girl's taking out the book and she's opening and she's telling everybody in the group, open your book, open your book. And I just say, what's going on? They didn't do the reading, and we're going to read right now. And I'm nodding my head at her. I say, yeah, that's the way it is. But all of those techniques work. But if you don't do the reading, if you're in a lit circle and I'm in a lit circle and somebody else is in a lit, and we're just going to sit there and shrug our shoulders because I was absent. So there's nothing wrong with a technique. There's only something wrong with it when you impose upon it, when you impose it on the classroom all the time. And I've always felt that a teacher is an adaptive artist, right? So a teacher has to have resources and has recourse to many different types of approaches. And there's some classes where you have to read with them. And there are other classes where you may be able to do some group work. And there are some other classes where you have to lecture. But education is always wanting to collapse everything into one activity. And then that changes. So then the lit circles were abandoned. And then you have differentiated instruction and learning by design. We actually had Grant Wiggins come to our school, by the way. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. We were taken aback by how he spoke to us. He was very condescending. And the whole room was quiet, but when people lecture you on how you should teach, and I found that profoundly insulting because we had an enormous amount of experience in that room, teachers who had worked 30, 35 years, 40 years, and the way he just carried himself. And the biggest irony of all was that he lectured us for 2 hours on how you shouldn't lecture. You can't make it up. You just really can't. You see these people doing precisely the same thing that they say they wouldn't do themselves. And the awful part about it is, and I'm sure many of your listeners and you yourself have heard administrators say, well, the research shows, best practices indicate, the evidence. Well, I'll tell you one thing you never hear. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that all these devices are absolutely toxic to the mental development of our young people. And yet they never cite that. They'll say, oh, no, it's teacher discretion. If you'd like to have phones in the classroom, that's fine with us, because if they had to take a stand on it, then they would have to hold themselves accountable. And if you want to hold kids accountable, you have to be able to hold yourself accountable first. They didn't create the society, we did, right? So if we don't have the courage to step up and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a school system where we're going to engage in different kinds of activities. You'll have your devices and you'll have your social media, but how about we learn how to make eye contact? How about we learn how to pay attention to what someone else is saying? How about we learn how to communicate? I didn't ask you for your opinion. I asked you whether or not you can represent somebody else's point in your words. Can you do that? But we would have to have the courage to do that. And already, I'm sure you've heard of it. People like Jonathan Haidt, social scientist, social psychologist. I think he's in NYU. The publishers of Harper's, I recently heard him interviewed about how in one peer-reviewed test or study of reading by neuroscientists, they were able to determine that kids between the ages of 10 and 12 actually read more deeply if they read on paper.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I've taught writers workshop, and I've used both computers and all that, but I'll never forget, I finally decided that when it comes to writing, I'm just going to keep it in the classroom, in binders, in notebooks. And many of those kids would tell me, I actually slow down when I write on paper. I think more. And I go, yeah, isn't that great? That's what you should do. You're so accustomed to swiping right, swiping left, that you don't experience anything in a different fashion. And that's the other thing, with these devices. We always talk about the junk content, all the awful things on the internet and social media and how awful that is. But we neglect the delivery system. That's the most toxic thing of all. And I say that because it reduces all of experience to one mediation, right? So I'm sure we've all seen this, right? You go to a concert and there's someone holding up the phone for the whole concert. You're at a restaurant and you see somebody taking a selfie. You're at a fireworks. I saw somebody at a fireworks display holding up the phone. I'm shaking my head like, what are you doing? And that collapses everything into one way of experiencing things. So you get this false notion that all of life is the same. So that's what I miss. I'm old enough to remember when a day at the beach was a day at the beach. And if someone called and you weren't home, God, that's a great feeling. That was one of the greatest feelings in life. Yeah, I wasn't around. Sorry, And so many people can't experience that anymore because, they're still thinking about their phone and all that. But so I think kids in education in particular, they need to experience different things that will cultivate their imagination and their intelligence. And maybe they could determine what their limitations and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And we could all be honest with one another instead of being trapped in this world where everyone is worried about the kind of profile they have. That's so exhausting and pathological, if you ask me. You have people who are just these kids too, who, they're trying to find out who they are. They don't know where they're going in life. And they're in this world where they have to put this artificial self and make sure that everyone likes it and that, they don't say anything wrong. And that's so exhausting. And I just think that as educators, we should offer an alternative, but you can't rely on the administration for that. They want to quote the authors they want to quote as evidence. So they cherry pick the evidence that supports their agenda. But when real things are going on that need to be addressed, they say, well, we can't do anything about that, so we'll just look the other way. And that's no way to lead. And it's certainly no way to earn anyone's respect.
Definitely. So I'm curious on the topic of students and social media, how have you seen the attitudes and the motivation and even the respect for authority change over these past 3 decades with students?
Okay, so I do believe that although we do see students that cannot be without their phones, we also see adults who cannot be without their phones, and that's rather pervasive as well. So they're setting the example, and I don't think they take enough responsibility for that. I've had, I don't know if this ever happened to you. Have you ever had a parent come to a teacher conference on the phone, like texting?
Absolutely. Yes.
And I'm the kind of person, whenever you're done, we can get started, because that, I find that to be immensely disrespectful. And of course you could put it, oh, he's just some old guy. But no, I mean, it's, I think that what makes civilization possible is that there are boundaries and there are certain behaviors that we expect from each other as educated citizens, that and these courtesies need to be extended. That's what makes a society possible. To your question about social media, if you live in a world where all you do is swipe right and swipe left, you're like an aimless frog going from one lily pad to the next. You're never experiencing anything in a profound way, only in a superficial way. You're trapped in this mindless stimulation of an eternal present, right? The only thing that matters is what's in front of you right now. And that makes it seem as though you're the only one in the world. So a lot of the misbehavior that you see, I think, stems from the notion that they are trapped in this bubble. And they think that since they have this device they can control, they can go anywhere they want, and it gives them the false sense of control. They feel that when something intrudes upon that, they ought to be able to control it as well. I mean, if they could swipe left on you, they would, or right, or whichever way it is. So unfortunately, because schools are afraid to address it, the parents will call up and say, I want to be in contact with my child. Let me give you an example, going back to the security thing, if you don't mind the story here. I think you'll like this. So have you ever practiced all the drills like shelter in place, lockdown, on-site evacuation, and off-site evacuation? Okay, so I think this story will make sense to you. So I can't remember how many years ago it was. It might have been around 10. I don't remember. So early in the morning, the announcement comes on. We have an off-site evacuation. Please, engage in the protocol. All the Delta Force 5 military talk came across, and okay, we're going to engage in the protocols and do all that. And we were great. The kids were great. The teachers were great. We went to this parking lot of a church, which was nearest to our school. And that was our official designated evacuation site. And I thought the kids, because we had practiced it and the teachers had practiced it, we did very well. And we knew that something was going on, because they would tell us in advance when we would have a drill of that nature, but they didn't tell us in advance. So we were all obviously concerned. So there we were in the parking lot, and time is going on. And next thing you know, these kids start pulling out their phones, right? Parental cars start to appear around the parking lot. And what are we going to do now? I mean, we're responsible for these kids. We have to take attendance. We have to keep them in the group, in the class. This is the whole point of the security drill, is to be accountable for all the staff and the students. And here are these parents coming to pick them up. And you heard these kids, I'm going home now. My mom said so, and the administration made the decision. Okay. We went crazy. I mean, the attendance secretaries, the teachers. Oh, is Trish staying? No, Trish is going. Is Mike staying? No, Mike's going. Okay, Mike. Oh, did the parent call? And we were doing this for 2 hours. Eventually, it turned out that there had been these criminals who had called in a fake threat to the school because they wanted to rob the bank. So their huge plan, which is like, right out of CSI or something, they thought that if they could decoy law enforcement over to the school, then they could have their way with their bank. And, they robbed the bank, and I think they got caught within 45 minutes. So I guess life's not like TV. Anyway, and I thought to myself, God, we went through all of this. We go through these protocols. We have these procedures. And these devices compromise the whole thing. These kids were able to call. I mean, okay, nothing happened. And we can look back on it and say they behaved well and nobody was hurt. But what if something had happened? Then what? The school would have been blamed. The teacher would have, you didn't follow. So we are progressively tasked with policing all of these things that are way beyond what our job is. We are people that have committed ourselves to, in my case in particular, I'm passionate about my discipline. And as the job has gone on, I realized, wow, I'm doing all these different things. So that it's the cell phones. In fact, when Facebook came out, well, you're too young for this, but when Facebook came out, I remember we had this big assembly. Oh, you need to be aware that they're bullying each other online and blah, blah, blah. And this affects us and you need to address it. And we're sitting there going, we're just teachers in a building. I mean, are you asking us to police the internet to determine to see if these kids are bullying each other? It is just so irrational to have that kind of an expectation. That's why for me, I really don't like it when people say there's a teacher shortage. I think there's nuance to that. There's a shortage of people who want to do the job. And I don't believe that teachers are abandoning the profession. I believe the profession has abandoned them, because by making them responsible for all these other things, making sure that the phones are out and that they're not all over the place, all these drills, all these things that gradually, and the test taking and all these companies that I could talk about where they come in with their platforms and their testing and their consultants. You're not doing what you used to do. You're not being the teacher. You're not getting through the books, through the reading, through the writing, which is the whole purpose. You don't want to teach people what to think. You want to teach them how to think. And the humanities has that responsibility. We used to be proud of that, before everything became STEM. You could have all the tools in the world, but you still have to do the thinking. The tools themselves, the technology, they're just tools. It's just like if I go to Home Depot, I could buy every shiny tool I see. It doesn't make me a carpenter. I mean, being a carpenter involves skill, experience. So I think what has happened with the phones is just one more thing that we have to be aware of. Now, the way I dealt with it was I would address it right in the beginning of the year. We had the shoe holders, you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I would take my phone and I would turn it off, and I, try to set the example. And then I did pretty much everything in class. And if you had established that early in the year, I found that it worked. But it's divisive if Trish does. Let's say Trish, in Trish's class, we can't have the phone. You know how kids are. Oh, she won't let us get to the phone, right? But then they come to my class and I want to be Mr. Hip, say, oh, no problem. Yeah, man. I could pander to them, but not only am I hurting them because they ought to be doing something else instead of being on the phone, which they're going to do anyway when they got out of school. I'm also hurting you. Because Trish, you're trying to, and I think that's where the administration needs to step in and say, in this school, no, it's not up to the teacher, it's up to us. We're not going to have any. And the evidence again continues to stack up about how these devices do not help them. Even these big tech moguls, right? These people who have invented all this technology, they don't let their own kids use it. They don't give them cell phones. So it's okay for us to have these phones for their data to be mined. Take Google Classroom, right? Imagine if you went into school and you told the administration, I don't want to use Google Classroom anymore. Could you imagine? They're like, seize him. Forget about it. They're just because, and yet we've accepted this without question, one thing after the other. I invite your listeners and your viewers to do something, if they're still working at a school, to make a list of all the different companies that are making money off the school district, especially if you work in a public school. Now, I'm not talking, when people talk about privatization, they either talk about a private school or a charter school, and there are many debates there and many points of views, and schools are different. I get all that. I've known teachers who work in public education who have worked in charter schools. I've heard different experiences. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about all these companies that sell a platform to the district. And nobody ever questions whether or not these things are actually helping anybody, not the students. So, for example, we had a lesson plan software that a company was selling to the district. I don't know, in the state where you work, did you have the learning standards that you had to check off on the lesson plan?
Definitely.
Let me tell you how that's changed. A lesson plan was a highly personal thing when I started working. Some districts had a certain format, but in my first job, I remember my supervisor who had a lot of experience, he sat with me about twice a year. He looked through my plans and, he would make some suggestions, but the way I did my plans was personal. What they wanted to see was this. Is this teacher organized? Is this teacher focused? Or is he flying by the seat of his pants, right? And then if that was the case, then the administrator would say, well, I need to see you planning. So it was on a case-by-case basis. If you needed to organize a teacher because with your experience, you saw that that person needed to be focused, then you acted accordingly. But then it became this accountability thing where, you must check off this. So then what happens? Well, teachers copy and paste, make sure that, but that tells you nothing, right? So if I tell you, for example, that I'm going to do a great piano concerto and I write it down and the notes are going to be beautiful and I write about how great it's going to sound and there will be a standing ovation and roses will be hurled at me and so on. I'm sorry, but you have to see the performance. It doesn't matter what I put down on a piece of paper. And we used to understand that, but no, this company came in and we had to pay for that. Then guidance had its own college application filing software. Then we have the grading software. Then we have the professional development software, which is also the evaluation software. And then we have Google Classroom. And then if you have Google Classroom, of course, they sell you the Chromebooks and the district buys it and you have to use it. And why? I mean, one of your guests, I believe, was an art teacher who said she was forced to use Google Classroom. She's an art teacher. She's got to have the kids drawing, doing things with their hands, getting your hands dirty with the clay. Isn't that wonderful? No, you have to filter it through Google Classroom somehow. And nobody questions any of this stuff. Then we had this, I don't know, you heard of these benchmarks, right? This is in addition to the state testing. So the benchmark company, another private company that would charge all this money, and you had to test the kids 3 times a year in math and English. And this took a long time because if you had special needs students, they were entitled to extra time. You had many absences. So when all was said and done, that was about 3 weeks of instructional time that was taken up by this company. And, they had to use their Chromebooks and they would use all this. And my question, going back to what I said about your listeners, I invite them to do this experiment. Make a list of all these software companies that are making a profit on this and ask yourself this question. Are the kids better writers? Are they better readers? Are the teachers happy to be there or doing a better job because of all this? So the old obvious question is chi bono, right? Who benefits, right? And what I see is these people making a mint. It's like ka-ching, because anytime you introduce a solution, you introduce other problems, right? And those problems could be profitable for certain people. I remember, this is really old now, right? You remember Looney Tunes with Porky Pig? And I mean, this is way back, but there's an episode that I used to love when I was a kid. Porky Pig took a room in a hotel. And he goes in there and he sees a mouse and he panics, and he calls, and Daffy Duck runs the place. It's like, no problem, sir. And he sends up a cat, right? So the cat comes into his room, takes care of the mouse. But now the cat's a problem. So Porky runs to the phone. Oh, my God, what am I going to do about the cat? And Daffy is like, don't you worry. And he's like counting the money. He sends up a dog and the dog takes care of the cat. Now he's got a dog problem. And the dog catcher. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what it's like. You give us these devices and they're off task. Now we need Go Guardian. Go Guardian is the software we have to pay for so that the teacher can and now that's more work for you, because in addition to your teaching, now you have to monitor them to see if they're on task, and you have to use Go Guardian. And if he's on task, you have to address it. And it could be so. We are progressively using these tools to create more and more bureaucracy, right? These tools are dictating to us what we should do, but we're the ones who are supposed to be in charge, not the tools themselves, So again, I feel like Porky Pig, you solve one problem, but that solution brings with it many other problems. Even with Google Classroom, they have that plagiarism checker, which they give you, I think, 5 free assignments that you can check. But then even if you catch somebody plagiarizing, you know what happens? Well, he needs a second chance. We all make mistakes. And even with deadlines, which no one has been able to satisfactorily explain to me, when people say, well, why do we have to have deadlines? And I would respond, I don't know about you, but on my mortgage statement, it says that if I pay late, it's an $85 fee. And there's a deadline for the water bill and the electric bill. And so, yes, we do live in a world that has deadlines. So what's wrong with teaching students to be aware of this? But anyway, you have to pay for the plagiarism. You pay for the Go Guardian or the Dino. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. That's just another variant of it, but we've used them here in New Jersey. So you realize that all this stuff has encroached on your profession so much that you're not really doing what the job is anymore. And that's what I mean by the job abandoning us. Now, excuse me, I'm one of the lucky ones in the sense that I was able to have a career and I've been acknowledged for it. I've kept many of the letters and cards that I received over the years. One of the most amazing things that happened to me just before I retired, I got an email from someone who said, you may not remember me. And it was an 8th grader from 1994. And I was like, oh my God, he's a principal now in his early 40s. And I was like, this is one of the most wonderful retirement gifts that so he thanked me for being his teacher and all that. So that's great. But I've also seen, I don't know if you want me to talk about that story, but so I've also seen some ugly sides to how we are perceived. But let me just wrap up one thing about all these companies and being in the profession. Remember that I asked about who benefits. Well, the companies benefits by profiting. The administrators benefit by demonstrating to the public and to the board that they've incorporated all these different tools. It makes them look better. Oh, and remember that the reigning ideology is that technology equals progress. That's not true. That's a belief. It's not a fact. It's an ideology, right? Technology does not necessarily equal progress. Technology is a convenience. It's still a tool, but it doesn't make you smarter. Remember when again, I keep saying you're so young, but I remember when the internet was coming around, everybody's, oh, we're all going to be brilliant. We'll have access to all of the world's great thinkers, and people will no longer watch, The Price is Right. They will be online reading books and becoming philosophers. No, they'll be online watching videos of some guy smashing Jello with a hammer, and, linking it and laughing at it like Beavis and Butthead or something. So yes, technology does not make us brighter. But anyway, so now going back to how teachers are perceived. So, and again, I've been fortunate. I really feel for teachers now because it's so difficult. And I know that there are many passionate teachers who want to learn more about their subject and want to make that knowledge contagious, and they would like to inspire students and whole, it's a lonely profession. You really have to have the courage of your convictions because people are coming at you all the time, and you really have to be strong and say, no, I believe in this, and this is the way it ought to be. And you have to do that with parents, with everybody. But I remember, I think it was 2017, I was honored with the Teacher of the Year award, and they're having a brief ceremony earlier in the year. And then at the end of the year, we used to have a staff in service. I don't know if you've had that experience where they had a luncheon. And in the luncheon, they brought everybody together who got an award, and they also talked about people who are retiring. And I remember at the time that there was a man that we all respected. He had about maybe 43, 44 years of experience. And he was the kind of person that he never called attention to himself, but he came in every day. He was just solid, and people don't understand that the world goes round because there are people like that who come in every day and do their job. And, they're not talking about how they're doing their job. They're actually doing their job, and they come in every day and give it their best. So our principal got up and said some wonderful things about him, and nice things were said about everybody. And then all of a sudden, when the board member's turn came to say something, he got up and he said, 44 years, I can't think of a job I had for more than 6 months. And I'm thinking, wow, out of all the things he could have said about this man, he could have easily said, thank you for your dedicating your life to this profession. We really appreciate it. That's all you had to do. But instead, he took it as an opportunity to imply that, hey, you're lucky you had a job for 44 years there, buddy. Because, and I just think, well, unfortunately, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? Because our society sees teachers as disposable and interchangeable, and we're not. We're not disposable. We're not interchangeable. So until society decides to cultivate that experience and to cherish it, because a seasoned educator has many things that he could bring to the classroom that would truly benefit your kids. I remember in the first years I taught a book, I would have a couple of resources. After 20 years of teaching the same book, I could connect it to articles, things that were going on now, documentaries. When YouTube came along, I would show them That's a positive instance of using technology. But I'll give you another example that's rather ridiculous. We used to have the projector in the room, which was great. I had a desktop, then I had the projector, and I still had the whiteboard. So when I wanted to use a computer and show something, I could. But if I wanted to turn it off and write on the board, I could do that as well. So it was great. It was like having the best of both worlds. I have the technology. I'm under control of the technology. They don't have all the devices. I have the device, and we do things together. We talk about them together. We analyze them together. I model what it is to analyze something, to ask questions, to represent something that is being expressed by either a writer or a speaker. Then they say, well, we have smart boards. We want you to have smart boards. So they put the smart board in there. The problem is they didn't really have the money to get everybody smart boards at the same time. So every classroom had a different smart board. So all the technology was different, and it took up all this room, and it was quirky and glitchy. And some days you had this big lesson plan and your smartboard doesn't work. And now there you are spending all this time. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Just so that we can say, oh, we have smartboards now, and we are looking, the 21st century, this whole idea that, yes, the 21st century, but we're still human beings, and there are things about us that never change, and we need to engage with one another. So I think that when you're dealing with kids and these devices, unfortunately, we've sent these messages to them, and I see them more as a symptom of a diseased society. Often we tend to individualize mental health. Oh, you're suffering from anxiety. Well, maybe the person is merely reacting to a pathological society. Maybe it's the society that's sick. And the way these kids are reacting by exhibiting all of these narcissistic traits, this selfishness, the defiance of authority. I saw this once, the psychologist, he was talking about narcissists. He said that it's not that narcissists don't know what the rules are. In fact, many of them know exactly what the rules are. They just don't think it applies to them. If you feel that you're in your own bubble and no one should interrupt that bubble, and you've been fed this since you were a kid, you've been given a tablet, you've been given a phone, and that's your whole world. If some teacher comes along and says, hey, maybe you ought to put that down, it's, how dare you? Who do you think you are? I know it's terrible, but we've created that world for them. They were born into this world that we've created, and we've allowed these runaway devices. We've allowed these devices to run away with this. Now you hear some rumblings. I know in New York, some schools want to ban all devices, and you see Zuckerberg apologizing. I think it's too late, though. I really do. I think that it's going to take us a while. And the privatization interests they don't want the phones and the devices to disappear, because that's how they make their money. They want to increasingly introduce, hey, look, you can use this platform, you can use that platform. And the administrators gush about it. Oh, look, we have Padlet and Pear Deck and this and that. And gradually we see less reading. I've even had kids in honors classes who don't read at all and admit it. That was unheard of. I remember when I started in the 90s, in an honors class, we had outside reading every month. We did poetry every week. We read books like The Grapes of Wrath, Tale of Two Cities. These were difficult books. There were about 10, 15 kids in those classes. 30 years later, about 60% of the class is considered honors. It's mathematically impossible. That is, by definition, if you're going to call something honors, that has to be an elite. If you have 60% of the people being an elite, then they're not an elite. So we are riddled with all these contradictions. And I've had kids tell me that they don't read. I've had a parent say, well, I would like him to be a better writer. I say, well, does he like to read? No. How about a hobby? Does he have a hobby? No. How about nonfiction? Maybe he keeps up with a blog, or maybe he listens to a podcast. No. What about something that you read? No. How could he be a better writer? I mean, are you seriously asking me that question after you answered no to all these different questions that I posed to you? You have to love it. You have to want to read. You have to want to write. I've even asked, does he keep a journal? Maybe he writes songs, poetry, talks about how his day went. So no, you could see the ideology. They think that you have one technique that you can offer to them, and that once they engage with that technique and implement it, they will magically be writers. And that's a very naive view of life, really. It's not very sophisticated. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was actually the next question that I was going to ask. I've had a lot of teachers on talk about how it is so difficult to get modern students to even turn in assignments, students that aren't able to form sentences or do a 5-paragraph essay, yet there's so much pressure from districts and administration to have grade inflation and have everybody pass.
Yes.
And therefore students have lost all motivation to work hard, and they've lost the capacity to think. So I'm curious how you've seen that happen over these past 3 decades.
I think that because of, again, if you have a general, just like when we talked about all the security, if you're going to use all this military language of a mission statement and secure the perimeter and be debriefed and deployed, you tend to generate a culture of fear, right? Everything's a conflict when everything is not necessarily a conflict. Just like the war on drugs. No, it's not about declaring the war on drugs. It's about understanding what the problem is. And that's not about having a war. It's about being intelligent individuals and seeing if we could figure out all of the different factors that are contributing to the current conditions. That's what a critical thinker ought to do, not declare war on. So I think what has happened with these students is that we have that one size fits all approach. And you had what was the previous question that I think you had another question about the.
I was just curious about grade inflation and how
Oh, the
that's
grade inflation.
manifesting.
Yes. So it used to be that if you went to school, like I remember the kids that I had in the 90s, if some of them got a D or a C, they would tell you, I'm not into school, but they'd be into something else. I like to play music, right? And it was okay. They didn't have the sense of entitlement that they have now where they do very little and they still want an A. And like I was saying about the mentality that you acquire, in other words, I think I heard someone once say that we talk about people having beliefs, but we forget that sometimes beliefs have us. And I think that when it comes to grading, the belief that has us is this transactional approach. I'm sure you've heard kids ask you, hey, can I do extra credit? And this is what I would say to them. You didn't ask me, how can I be a better writer? You didn't look at the comments that I made on your paper. You didn't read over. I was often, if I had a really strong student, I would approach the student and I'd say, you wrote a great essay. Is it okay if I stream that on Google Classroom? Is it okay if I share it with the class? I just want to show that it's possible to work hard on something. And I think that coming from a fellow student, it would definitely make an impression, far more of an impression than coming from the teacher. But did you bother to read somebody else's work? No. You see, all they want is that transaction. Well, can't I just do a little busy work? I'm getting like an 89. If I give you like a busy work ditto, will you make it a 91? So that's part of it, the transactional belief that I turn this in and the grade is some kind of a payoff, as if it's a salary or something. It isn't. You're there to learn. You're there to see your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations. You're not there to necessarily earn a grade. The grade should be something that is incidental to the real purpose of education, but that is completely lost. With regard to the grade inflation, I know that the school, when I retired, they were doing the second chance initiative, which I just, many teachers were against because they felt that if you did an assignment, you should learn from that assignment and move on. But if the second chance is going to be seen as an opportunity to coerce teachers or for the parents to use as leverage against the teacher to get a better grade. Now, when you inflate grades, the way it happens, it's a consequence of the whole system. In other words, there's not a big conspiracy of people saying, we need to lower grades. What happens is that if you're saying to me that 60% of the class is at the honors level, then the teachers are automatically coerced to lower the standards because they can't do otherwise. Because if I have to deal with all these consultants and their benchmarks and the bureaucracy and all these platforms that I have to use and the lesson plans that I have to write, I can't get through this book and I have to give them a second chance, then all of that gradually will lower the expectations for the students. And the students know that the expectations are lowered. So in the school where I was, there used to be 3 sections. Now, it wasn't perfect. We had the honor section, the college prep section, which was the average, and we had the skills section. It wasn't perfect, but it was at least more honest than what it became. They gradually moved all of the lower kids into the college prep section. It's a dumping. I never thought it was a dumping ground. In fact, I had all sections, and those kids were desperate for structure. I've always been a very organized and structured teacher, and I've had students in that section who unfortunately are no longer with us. Some of them have died or some of them have gone to prison. There were some tough kids. I learned a lot from them, but they used to keep their size small. I would have like 10, 12 of them in the class. And what I would do with them, and I say, look, I'm not going to give you homework. I know you guys have these things going on in life, but from bell to bell, we're going to work here, okay? And I'm not going to tolerate any less from you. So I had expectations. And in the beginning of the year, I would work really hard to get into that rhythm, to that continuity. And after that, it would pretty much take care of itself. And if I needed to address something, I addressed it. And in those days, I had a lot of administrative support. And they were grateful that, you would work with those kids and we would read together and I would pick out short stories. I know maybe they can't handle a novel, but I used to have this book called Possibilities of all these great stories like Button. Some of them had been turned into Twilight Zone episodes. And every now and then they'd come in, hey, we're going to read today. And I realized that I was probably the only structure that these kids had in their lives. They went home. They probably didn't know if they were going to have any dinner or if the parents are going to be home or anything like that. So they were dying for some kind of authority figure and guidance. It wasn't just about, hey, just throw them into a higher level class. No, you need a different kind of student at the higher level, a student that can be more independent, a student whom you can trust. But you can't do that, say, well, long story short, they put all those kids in the college prep section. So what starts to happen is that now, since you have the lower kids, you can't teach the college prep at the college prep level. So you have to go to the lowest common denominator. And then many parents see, oh my God, they put the low kids in the college prep. I don't want my kid in the college prep. If they're with the low kids, I want my college prep kid to be in the honors. And with the parental coercion and their influence and their pressure, they were able to have that happen. So as a result, we do less, they do less, we do more, right? The teachers do more with all the bureaucracy and the meetings and all these boxes that you have to check and all these accountability measures and all of the myriad ways in which you are micromanaged, right? And the students are basically not doing a whole lot, and that creates the lowering. I don't know if this happened to you in the private school. I was shocked by this, but they had an automatic 60 for the marking period, no matter what you did.
Wow.
And they also had this drop schedule, the 4-day rotation. So 2 classes were dropped every day. So if you looked at the instructional time, it was about 160 days. And then they had all these activities going on, plus the absences. I would say that generously speaking, many of those kids were probably in class 80 to 100 days, if you really thought about it. And then you could actually, passing was a 70 to them. So you could actually do nothing for 2 marking periods and then get 280. So 80, 80, 160, 60, 60 is 120. You get yourself a 280 divided by 4. That's a 70. That's preposterous. To be able to pass for the year by doing nothing for 2 marking periods. And then, well, they would say, you don't want them to get a 0 because then they wouldn't be able to recover from that. And that wasn't even the school. It was my understanding that was a dictate of the diocese. So the diocese, all the schools in that diocese had to use that method. And I just thought, well, I mean, if you're a student, you could see right away that you're not going to learn anything. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that there are, and I have met them, I know there are students who want to learn. They don't want a teacher who just panders to them. I was one of them. I'll never forget when I was in school, I took this elective called Consumer Affairs, and I was actually excited about it because I had a book and I was leafing through it. It was all about how to get a loan and buy a car. And, I was 14. Like, I didn't know about that stuff. Like, how do you write a check? How do you pay bills? And I thought this is going to be great. So I get to that class and the guy comes in, and I think he was also a coach, and you could tell he had his pets in that class. So he says, all right, open the book, go to the first chapter, read it, answer the questions at the end, don't bother me. He said it just like that, opened up his newspaper, and he's chilling out, hanging out. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, one guy goes, hey, Mr. A, how about them Giants? And, he folds the newspaper and he starts talking about the Giants, and they talk about the Yankees. And one day I'm in the cafeteria and I'm complaining about this guy. I'm like, man, this guy doesn't teach us anything. And the other students, they got on me. Oh, shut up. It's an easy A. Why do you have to be on him? He's really cool. Yeah, he might be cool and hip and all that, but he's not doing his job. He's not teaching. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. I actually wanted to learn how to write a check. What's wrong with that? So anyway, the students got on me and said, oh, he's easy. And yeah, we all got A's, but I kid you not. His assignment was read the chapter, do the questions, which he didn't even read. He just put whatever, you could put Mickey Mouse to number 1 and he check it off and you'd get 100. And I always remember that I definitely never wanted to be that kind of teacher. And I've seen them, they take selfies with the students and I get it in a way, but in another way, I don't get it. I just don't think that it's right. And I know many people talk about, well, you have to have a relationship. Yes, but that relationship should be a professional one. It should be one where you are understood in your role as the teacher and they see themselves in their role as a student. And therein lies our civilized, professional, distanced relationship. It's not about pandering to them or being their friends or giving them A's so that they like you. So if you really feel that it's a popularity contest, then maybe teaching is definitely not for you. I just think that I would rather be respected than liked. You can't control anybody. If somebody's going to like you, they're going to like you. If they're going to dislike you, they're going to dislike you. And I think if you go in there trying to please everybody, then I just think that exacerbates all these other problems that we're talking about. But going back to the grade inflation, it's very tempting. And I understand because, hey, and I've seen it where, put it this way, let's say that we're in class and Trish is the kind of teacher that lets me hang out on my phone because you're so cool, Trish, and I listen to music and I'm hanging out and I can play a game. So now Trish gives me an assignment. I know that if I finish that assignment within 2 minutes or so, I can get to my phone, oh yeah, and I can just hang out and text my friends, Snapchat, do whatever. So by you allowing me to do that, you are undermining the whole purpose of your assignment. You want me to engage with your assignment. You want me to slow down and to think about it and to use class time accordingly to do the best I can. If you give me an out, if you say, oh, hey, but it's easy to do that. It's so easy to just give them a 5-minute assignment. And I really don't want to demean anybody who does that because I understand why people do that. I completely understand it. I come from a different background and I have the experience, but not, if I were a new teacher today, I think I would be under so much pressure to do all that stuff because I never see administrators address that. You see them walking up and down the hallways and you see in some classrooms they're all on their phones. I mean, if I were the principal and I saw every day I walk by the hallway, if they walk by the hallway to begin with, but if they look into the classroom and they see everybody hanging out on a device, I would want to talk to that teacher. Say, maybe you need to lay off the devices. You're teaching history. Let's see something. But I think teachers realize that if they do have standards, they get punished for it. Like I told you in my email, I waited, and I swear to God I did. I waited for the day when some parent walked in and said, hey, that A you gave was too easy. That never happened, ever. My judgment was only off on the B's and the C's and the D's, but my A's were all, and that's a terrible message to be sending because, unfortunately, just like in every profession, we have strong people, we have weak people, we have in between people, competent people, and so on. But if you want to not only lower grades, but encourage people who don't want to work at all, well, having no standards is a guaranteed way to say, you know what? If I have standards, they come down on me. Here you go. No problem. Oh, you want an A? Here you go. Now, the big question is, how does that help us as a society? So I think we need to cultivate professional relationships where we know our role. When I go to my mechanic, I don't say, I need a hug. No, fix my car. And I like the guy. He's great. I've been going to him. Seriously, I've been going to him for like 30 years. I love this mechanic, but you know what? The reason I love him is because I can rely on him. And he's competent and he does what he says he's going to do. And unfortunately, unless we as adults have the courage to be adults, then that's not going to happen. We're not going to set that example. I'll give you a story with my dad. My dad never went to college, and we were from Uruguay, so his English was absolutely atrocious. It just couldn't speak. And I never forget, I was in my physics class, and the guy that was teaching the class, he meant well, but he could not control the room at all. It was absolute mayhem. I mean, just to give you an idea how bad it was, the Bunsen burners in the science class, kids were taking like their Papermate pens and like welding them together. It was awful, and he had no control whatsoever. So when we were in the regular class, when he did his lectures, I started being this wise guy, And at the time, Saturday Night Live had this Martin Short character. He was like this lawyer who asked a lot of questions. So I was acting like this lawyer on Saturday Night Live, being really a wise guy. And he got fed up and he called my father. So here I am in this bizarre situation where I have to translate for my dad he can't really understand English. So I have to tell my dad how badly I'm behaving in this guy's class, right? So I'll never forget. I hope I can keep it together because he's not with us anymore. But I remember he was just nodding and I could tell, oh my God, my dad is so embarrassed by this, right? And he just nodded and looked at me, nodded, and he just thanked the guy and apologized to the teacher. And then he got me in the car and he said, you're not doing this. That's the first thing out of his mouth. And I go, oh, you don't understand. He doesn't know what he's doing. He acts like a college teacher. He lectures all the time. He tells us to read 3 chapters at a time. It's physics. I don't know. And he put his hand up like that. No, your job is to be in school and to behave accordingly. My job is to go to work. Your job is to go to school. And that's when I think this is the first time, one of those moments where you're being asked to step up and be a man. This was a moment for me because he said, I need an answer right now. I could use the help. I was already a junior, I believe, 16. Yeah, I was 16. And he said, I could bring you to work painting with me. You could help me pay the bills. You're not going to waste my time going to school, having some teacher call me. I don't care how the teacher is. You need to be responsible for yourself. So I want an answer now. Are you going to work or are you going to stay in school? So yeah.
That is beautiful. Wow. So I'm kind of curious, have you seen parents like that in modern education? Because even starting in 2013, my automatic nemesis was parents and accountability. It's like anything that I would even suggest that their kid was doing wrong, they were ready to come after me. So did parents support you, or did you have a mixed bag? How did that work?
It definitely had a mixed bag. I think it depends on the district too. In the first district I worked in, it was more of a working class town. So there were some parents who weren't there at all, as much as I thought they should be, or they were too focused on sports. I'll never forget, I had this kid who was a great basketball player, and they made me coach basketball. I didn't want to do it, but hey, we need somebody, and you're a new teacher, therefore you're doing it. So, okay. I told him, I don't know what I'm doing. No problem. Okay, so I did it. But I remember contacting the mother about the academics, and I never saw her come in, but she was at all the basketball games. So there's definitely a mixed bag. And I have had some parents who were appreciative and who have told me, I'm glad that you have standards. I'm glad that you hold them accountable. Unfortunately, as time went on, that was a minority. Right? Remember what I talked about, the transactional belief that I do this, give me an 80, that's not really thinking or anything. It's just transactional. So I had this mother one time who said, well, do you do extra credit? And I said, well, I don't negotiate grades. And she didn't like it. She blew her top. Oh, I never suggested that. Well, yes, you did, actually. You suggested because you want him to do business. You didn't ask me again. How can it be a better writer? But believe it or not, I have had parents who have said, I don't care what grade he gets. It's, and they follow through on that. I want to know whether or not he's learning something. So I've been asked that and I've been shocked. And believe me, I thank people for that. I was, that's fantastic. But I think that if you're living in a society where teachers are not generally respected, I remember I had a student in a writer's workshop class who signed up for a writer's workshop class and then was utterly shocked that writing was required. We're not just going to get to hang. I thought this was an elective. I go, no, it's writer's workshop. Writer's workshop. We're going to work. See, workshop. So anyway, you could tell he was really steaming about this. He didn't like it. So he did my weekly assignments. And I'll never forget one of his sentences. He pulled out those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach Jim. Ha ha ha. Rah. Well, he's lucky if he ever, the only reason that sentence was correct was because it wasn't his. But, but be that as it may, it's easy to think, oh, this kid's being a wise guy. But the reality is that it is unfortunately reflective of the wider perception in the culture. So you will have parents who think, you're not really smart enough to do anything. That's the reason you're doing this. Therefore, don't give me this about my child. My child is brilliant and he deserves. So I would encourage teachers, and I know what you mean. You said in 2013, and you've seen more of a change, especially with all the social media and all these terrible things that people talk about. But I think since there is a shortage, as the so-called shortage, I hope teachers would just assert themselves more and remind people what their job is like. I'll give you an example. When people were gushing about email, I remember this might have been in the late 90s. We had computers in the building, but we didn't have a computer per teacher. Eventually every room had a computer. And with that came email. And I remember we had an in-service and there was all this gushing. Isn't it fantastic? We can connect with the parents and all that. And I'm sitting there thinking, where am I going to get the time to write these emails, right? Because we're already teaching and planning and correcting papers, especially in English. We're reading all these essays. We're going through these books. And now I have 120 kids. I'm going to have to respond. And I raised my hand and said, I'm sorry, but this is really not part of our job. This is an additional responsibility. Oh, what are you talking about? This is the way of the world. This is the reality we're facing. No, I understand that this is a reality we're facing, but that doesn't mean it's suddenly my job, there might be more muggings going on, but it doesn't mean that my job is to go out there and arrest people. So everybody said, oh, come on, don't overreact. Next thing you know, 10, 15 years later, email is required. You have to answer your email. Make sure you respond to emails in a professional and timely fashion and all that. And going back to what I was saying about teachers asserting themselves, please, and I think you could have this stuff in advance. You should have like 5 rules for your class. And you should also have 5 rules or rules concerning the proper etiquette. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I would look at the timestamp on some emails. It's like, man, this kid is emailing me at 2:00 in the morning. This is inappropriate. So I would say I can answer an email within school hours. You can meet with me, but every now and then, you know what it's like. I would get a Declaration of Independence email, especially at the beginning of the year. Connor is a special child and ever since 2nd grade. And now, oh my God, he's a sophomore. And I'm going to have to listen and read through like 15 years of this kid's life or whatever. But once again, we are not a private tutor. We have the responsibility of teaching many students, and we need support there. We need the understanding, and it varies from district to district. I know where my schools went, where my children went to school. Where my children went to school, the principal there sent out an email saying that please be mindful that teachers have many responsibilities. So if you do email them, be considerate and, do so during school hours. And I remember when I saw the principal, I said, thank you for doing that. This was the K-8 school. And I said, that was so nice of you to do that. And I was talking to her about some of the things that I had seen, even with the lesson plans and all that stuff. And she said, oh, no, I don't do that. I trust my teachers. And I thought, you know what? That's not a minor thing. That it's so important. I'll give you another example. You get all these people, what are going to 83? We're always bombarded with that kind of thing, especially in recent years. But just to give people an example of what inspires a teacher to work harder for you, here it is. Here's the big secret. So about maybe 7 years ago, I was teaching Into the Wild by John Krakauer. It's a nonfiction book about the kid who abandoned his life and he wound up dead in that bus in Alaska. They made a movie with Sean Penn and all that. Sean Penn directed it. And I was teaching that book. And I remember a kid came up to me after class and he said, I'm really enjoying this book and I don't like to read, but I like the fact that it's nonfiction and it has the outdoors and all that stuff. And I really want to find a way of reading more, but most of the stuff I come across, I just don't like or I don't find it interesting. Would you recommend something that's like Into the Wild? And I was almost in tears. I was like, oh no, this. And I went home and I'm looking through the website and I found this book and then I wound up reading it myself. And then the next day I was so excited to give him a list of different books. And that just happened, It wasn't work for me because I saw that he had the initiative. So that's what I mean by a professional relationship. My obligation is to be loyal to my discipline, to be passionate about language, what I love, reading, what reading can do for you, how it can make you think, how it can cultivate your critical thinking. And I'm going to care even if you don't, but I'm not going to be taken advantage of. And you're not going to treat me as a personal secretary. So I believe that there is a polite and professional way of pushing back, and I think we should. Often I see teachers who allow people to just keep asking for more and more and more and more. And you could tell that they're giving it their all and people still ask for more. So I think it behooves you to lean into who you are. Don't be afraid to be the person you are and to find the style that goes along with your personality. I think that's another big mistake that people make, is that everyone has to use one technique, as we already discussed. No, we have various tools at our disposal and teachers have different personalities. And that's great. Isn't that great? Wasn't it great that when you went to school, oh, I have Trish now and she's different than Mike. And that's a good thing, Not that, oh, Trisha's using portfolios and exit tickets, Mike's using portfolios. And I mean, think of it from the point of view of a kid. If every class the kid goes to, he's bombarded with a typical jargon, I'm just checking the temperature here, what's going on, let's have an exit ticket. And it's completely unrealistic. I think that you should affirm your professionalism, your experience, your credentials. And, if you're honest about it, if you can, at the end of the day, look at yourself in the mirror and say, I have given it my best and I was a professional, then you have absolutely no regrets. On the other hand, if you're pandering and people are walking all over you, people will take advantage of you, especially with your cooperation. So I encourage teachers to not be afraid to say, no, that's not what my job is. And if you need to leave, and if you still want to stay, if you already know that, if you're already thinking about moving on, then I think it's a good idea to do research and to look around and see, is there a better school somewhere? Is there a better district? And I think they're out there, but it's changing and it has to change. I mean, the way we are approaching education, like I said, the only people that seem to be benefiting are those that are appropriating it, claiming expertise on our behalf, selling districts all these products. And then when things go wrong, they blame us, all while ignoring real issues that need to be addressed. So we're in an extremely difficult position right now in terms of the profession. So
Yeah. I'm just curious how you survived education for 30 years. I'm wondering because you're so aware of everything that's gone wrong. And I think for so many teachers, they just feel like they cannot survive the environment. They have micromanaging admins that aren't giving them the option to do what they know is best in the classroom. And they're unable to escape that. So, did you just find a way to kind of close your door and teach and keep the admins from buzzing around you? Or did you have so much respect in the building that they trusted you and left you alone?
I think there's a combination of things. And I think because I had the experience, then in addition to the trial and error of the classroom, the things you learn from, the resources you amass over the years, I also had experience dealing with people. And I've had some wonderful administrators. I definitely don't want to give the impression that I haven't, because I've had people who have taught in the classroom, people who really knew what they were doing. The last 10 years, just to give you an example, I had about 5 different supervisors because of the turnover. Now, there were wonderful people. Don't get me wrong. I liked them. But going back to the trust thing, if you want a leader, in other words, if I want to look up to you as a leader, then there has to be some kind of an emotional investment in me. I have to feel that Trish has my back. If Trish is going to quit at the end of next year, then there's really no incentive for me to have any kind of relationship other than good morning, hello, and I'll be a professional, you'll be a professional, but new supervisor. So I think part of the reason I survived was because I was coming from that experience. And I think that if they did confront me with something, I was pretty good at defending myself. I'm imperfect. I have all my flaws, but I think you still have to stand your ground. Otherwise, as you know, they will walk all over you. So I've taken that approach. Some people have said, well, you're really tall. You have a presence in the room. You look like the Breaking Bad guy, Yeah. In fact, some of my students actually photoshopped my head on like the Breaking Bad poster, but they asked my permission. And when they ask permission to make fun of you, that's respect, So, but I disagree, actually. I don't think it's entirely that. Okay, I'm a big guy and no nonsense and all that, and I've tried to maintain that. But I had a high school teacher, I kid you not. She was half our size. There was a bunch of big guys, but there was the way she carried herself, that she was going to teach English in that class. And if you were going to give her any trouble, she was going to address it. She'd take you out in the hallway and have a conversation. She just carried herself with this aura, and we respected her. And she's still one of my favorite teachers. I learned so much in her class from Edgar Allan Poe, and she was tough. I had to use a typewriter in those days, and if you made a mistake, you couldn't white it out. You had to start again. You had to run. When I got an 83 for her paper, I was celebrating. And that was regular English, So I come from that kind of a background. And she carried herself with that authority because she had the courage of her convictions, And I think when you have the courage of your convictions, there's a certain authority that you gain. Now, of course, you still make mistakes. You still have flaws, you still make adjustments. But if on the other hand, you take the approach of just pandering to parents, pandering to administrators, so I don't know what it would be like if I were a new teacher now. I would probably do what everybody else does, which is stay a little bit and then just move on, because that's what everybody seems to be doing. But since I did have that experience of standing up for myself when I needed to. Something happened to me early on. Maybe this is a contributing factor. I don't know. But I remember this was my first year in that. So I did 2 years with the 8th grade, and then I went to this other school, and I had an honors section class, and eventually I would wind up teaching honors. I taught film, I taught writers workshops, speech, 10th grade, 11th and 12th grade mixed up for the electives in 12th grade. But the first year I was there, I had a student in the class who was absent a lot, and she wasn't doing much of the work. And she turned in a paper, she turned it in late, and I think she got a C- or something like that. I don't know if I took 10 points off. It was something like that. And the supervisor got a hold of me. Oh, you can't do that to her. And I'm looking at her. I'm not really understanding what you mean. Oh, don't you know who she is? And it's a wealthier district. Everybody knows each other. It was that kind of thing. No, I don't know who she is. And why should that make a difference, right? Oh, well, she lives next door to the president of the board, and this is going to mushroom. I remember the word she used. This is going to mushroom out of your control. And I think that you need to change the grade. And if you don't change the grade, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to talk to that parent. And I remember going home, and thinking, do I want to stay in a place like this? I mean, what if I just cave in and go, okay, let her do it again. It's okay. I'll be Santa Claus. I decided, no, I'm not doing that. It's wrong. She turned it in late. She had about 40 absences, so you could tell how they were looking the other way. That was another problem in that district. They really, again, you can have any policy you want, but unless it's enforced, it's meaningless. I saw that in the private school, by the way. Before I worked there, I looked at their student and parental handbook, and they had this whole section on cell phones, and cell phones are forbidden, and you have to turn them over, and it's an automatic suspension if you don't. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, these people really mean business. Nothing could be further from the truth. The cell phones were out everywhere. I'm like, wait a minute, So I remember when I did take a cell phone, and they said, wow, we don't really, I pulled out that, well, that's your policy, I'm doing my job. But anyway, I think that part of the survival comes from just having the courage to say, if I need to move on from this, I guess I'll have to, or I'll just go to another school. But if I allow this, if I allow somebody to coerce me to change a grade, I always felt that's going to open the floodgates. And in a small town where parents talk to each other, that's going to spread. Oh, just call him up. He'll give you an A. And I don't want that. I definitely didn't want that. So that, and then the experience, I think learning how to, okay, when I've had this situation, how to deal with it, and how did I take into account the advice that I received from administrators that I really respected. Again, you have to remember that before people became principals and vice principals and department supervisors, in those days, they had been in the classroom. I remember the math supervisor had about 25 years in the classroom before she became a supervisor. Whereas I remember in the math department, 1 year they had a supervisor who had no classroom experience. And yet she was a supervisor to people who had over 30 years of experience. So everything has been turned around. That's why it's so difficult, because there's nowhere to turn, nowhere to go. So given that there's nowhere to go, given that many things might be against you, the only recourse that you have is self-respect, and say, I'm sorry, but this is wrong. I don't say that lightly, because it's really not, I mean, it's easy for me. I got a career. I was able to retire. So I don't want to make it sound glib about it at all. But since there doesn't seem to be any other alternative, and since there are shortages everywhere, you might as well stand your ground. You should be assertive and derive confidence from that. I would suggest that you are clear and professional right from the get-go. That's why I always think you should have rules. I would have my student, I don't know if you've ever done this, I would have students sign an honor pledge. So I would give them a contract. You can't use Spark Notes, Google. When you write a paper, you're going to work on it in class. We're going to do it on paper. We'll use devices when we need to use devices, but for the most part, I want you to practice reflecting, thinking, reading, analyzing, and so on. So I would put that up front, and they would sign it. I mean, and parents would sign it too. But if my expectations were clear from the beginning, if I could establish continuity, then that empowers me to have the presence I need to run that classroom. Now, The reason I decided to retire, and it is an early retirement because I just turned 56. So nowadays you can't even do that. I think you have to retire at 65, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, I'm not
outrageous.
sure.
At least in New Jersey, I believe it is. Yeah. But anyway, now that you can't do that anymore, it just makes it really hard. But please be clear about what you want. I think if you organize your class time, we have a do now, we have these activities. So I was going to say about why I decided to retire, because all these other activities began to encroach on all the things that I love to do. Like some of our colleagues, we were talking about how much instructional time we were losing with proctoring for tests. So we would proctor the ACT, the SAT, and the New Jersey state test. Then we had to proctor the 3 benchmarks from these consultant corporations that the administrators use to track growth and progress. When all is said and done, we would easily lose about 1 full marking period of instructional time that we used to have. We used to be able to expand, and that was wonderful. Like, I was talking to you about Into the Wild. That book was published in 1996. Since then, there have been other books, films, documentaries. His sister has come forward. There are great PBS videos. Every year I would incorporate some new article, people who didn't like the character, people who felt they had turned them into a hero. And when I had time to cover that, we do some nonfiction, some passage analysis. Let's look at a documentary. It was great. It was wonderful to have those discussions. I would have different essay topics. I would give them the choices. And my point was not to memorize anything, but to show me that you're actually thinking, that you're engaging with the material, that you can accurately represent. Well, you can't establish that kind of continuity anymore. You're too busy doing drills, proctoring exams, going to assemblies, dealing with these absences that, my God, are so prevalent. I don't know if you've experienced this, and many administrators will just say, well, they get credit for the day. They were early dismissal with credit for the day. I've seen that on the attendance. And so I just think, once again, that it is not teachers who abandon the profession. It's the profession that has abandoned us. And if we would be trusted to do what we know how to do and held accountable for being competent and having clear expectations and establishing that continuity, think about it. How do you actually learn something? Not the way a computer does. It's not like the Matrix movie where, I need a kung fu program and, okay, now I know how to fight. No, it doesn't work. We don't work that way. Computers might work that way. We don't work that way. So if you want to play the piano or the guitar or something like that, you have to get into a rhythm of some kind, right? Okay, I practice. And after a while, you say, oh, wow, I can do that now. And I don't even think about it, right? And the same thing happens with learning. You have to create the kind of continuity where you're reading, you're analyzing, you're writing. If you can't get any regular continuity with all of these different activities, you're not going anywhere. It's like you're starting anew every single day. That's why I invite your viewers to ask, all these platforms that have been introduced, all this technology that has been introduced, then ask yourself, what reading level are these kids at? Are they even reading? And I think you already know your answer there. And that's because they haven't let us do what we are hired to do. And they haven't supported us, or they stopped supporting us with behavior, with not they'll hold us accountable. They won't hold anybody else accountable. And once again, remember the part about beliefs having us, right? The belief has us. If education is for profit, if education, especially public educational, is only transactional, then the students are no longer students. They are clients. And if they are clients, and it's not about educating them, it's about customer service. And I'm sorry, but I am not a customer service representative. I'm an educator.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just kind of reflecting upon my own experiences, and I just found it impossible because, at least if you were to magically come to my city, essentially all of the public schools, you're going to find that they have completely done away with traditional grades. So essentially, they only have a benchmarking district program where maybe there's about 3 or 4 tests per quarter that they can take infinitely. And even that isn't given a traditional grade. It might be like needs improvement, working towards standards, and meets standards. So you'll find, as an English teacher, I could assign, let's say 14 assignments for 9 weeks and have 95% of the students turn in 10% of the work, and they still, pass. And on top of that, the behavior was abysmal, and there was all these
Yes.
initiatives about, you can't send them to the office, you can't do anything. And so what I ended up finding, even the small pockets of things that I loved, like teaching novels, I was told, oh, you can't teach novels anymore.
Yes.
You can't do, class novels. And then they'd give us a horrible canned curriculum that was on the iPads,
Yes.
that they were supposed to complete. And so I just ended up finding by the time that I quit, it was an impossible situation. It was, in the pandemic era, 2021. So we had a mix of, in person and online. And essentially nobody was doing any work. So I was just essentially standing there trying with all of my might to engage their attention. They have their laptops or their iPads and they're messaging each other and all these
Yes.
things. And we're told you can't really police that. You have to teach them how to be digital citizens. And so, like, all these crazy things where literally there was nothing I could do. And I felt like I was, a poorly paid educational entertainer that,
Yes.
compared to the
Yes.
iPads and their phones, like I had no chance. And so what I'm trying to figure out here is I'm thinking maybe in the regions and pockets of the United States or around the world where teachers have some bit of being able to control what they do and some kind of way to manage behavior, I think teachers can survive. But it's like when you're coming into this
No,
climate where
absolutely.
you're just doomed from the beginning, I just think it's so hard to stay in education.
I completely agree. And it varies from district to district. And I think because I'm older, I think I got away with more of we're going to use binders and notebooks and we're going to put the devices aside. And I think, well, he's just some old guy. But it's not that at all. It has nothing to do with that. To your point about grading, once the student becomes a client, you can't tell them the truth, right?
Yeah.
You notice if I call Verizon, they're all gushing, oh, thank you very much for calling us today. And how is your day going? I'm so glad you called. I am so happy to speak. And then you ask them a question, oh, I'll be more than 5. And okay, you don't have to read the script. That's okay. I'm just trying to find out why the bill went up for $10. We don't have to be friends, but again, they want to treat me in such a way that they don't displease me lest anyone leave. I mean, I saw that in the private school. You could tell that it felt more like a retention department, right? Oh, we don't want to upset the student. Let's make it easy. It's a great environment. God forbid they leave and not pay, So, but once the student becomes a client, a customer, then you can't grade them for real because grading them for real would only expose the truth. I've had students tell me, oh my God, you actually read my essay and you corrected it. And yes, I did. So some of them were like, okay, next time I'll be more careful. That's right. That's the point. That's what I'm trying to teach you. I have to push back. I have to be the nitpicker. I'm doing it so that you become a better writer. If I just rubber stamp it and say, that's fantastic, you're wonderful, I'm hurting you, right? I'm not telling you anything good, but I agree with you. It is absolutely impossible under these conditions where this whole nonsense about being a digital citizen. Well, what exactly does that mean? Because being a citizen is something that involves other things, as in knowing what your civic responsibilities are. What is voting about? What is jury duty? How do you change something in your neighborhood? If you go to a council meeting, how do you affect local politics? If you ask them that, they don't know. So this whole idea of digital citizenship is, again, this corporate manufactured concept. Oh, it's the 21st century. It's all about computers and technology. Therefore, they're digital citizens. No, they're not automatic citizens. A real citizen is informed. A real citizen has to be educated. A real citizen stands up for himself and those in his community and goes forward and tries to do something different. That's a citizen. And, having an iPad doesn't automatically make you that. But it's funny with all these techniques they push. All you have to do is, here's a little thought experiment you could have a lot of fun with. If you look at some of these so-called methods that administrators love to gush about, if you try to apply them to something else, you'll see exactly how ridiculous they are. Take the constant, brainstorming approach where you're not the sage on the stage. You're the guide on the side, right? All right. So imagine you had a leaky pipe and you call the plumber, and the plumber comes in and goes, hey guys, I brought some Post-its with me. I can't do this right now, but I want you and your family to get together and brainstorm ways about fixing the pipe. And little Timmy goes, you could use bubble gum and bubble gum. Timmy, that's fantastic. No, it's not fantastic. Little Timmy doesn't know what he's talking about, and that pipe's not getting fixed. You need to let the plumber do his job. He is the sage on the stage, right? But I'm not saying that group work isn't appropriate, but it is appropriate insofar as you have the kind of student that is amenable to that approach.
Yeah.
So that if I've had advanced students, fantastic writers, that I've had on the paper and I've had them in class. And if I give them some group activity and I monitor it, they're going to be fantastic. And then when they express themselves, they're going to be articulate. But that's because they're good writers. They like to read. They have initiative. They want to be good students. But I can't just throw Post-its at a group of kids who don't like to read and say, okay, guys, what's the temperature in here? How do you feel? That doesn't work, But, and I'm sure you've seen it, right? People will say, oh, you should have an exit ticket. And, I think if I were a kid and every class I went to had an exit ticket, by the 6th exit ticket, I'd be making an exit. I'm out of here. So, and again, it all boils down to not think. But since the point is to sell a technique, and selling that technique contributes to the administrative optics, so they could present to the community and to the board, look at us. We've incorporated all these different platforms. We are ready for the 21st century digital citizen. People clap. But the reality is that they can't read and they can't write. And I don't know. I don't want citizens who can't read or write. So they've unfortunately abdicated on their responsibility to educate our children. And they put it on our backs by not letting us do our jobs, by micromanaging us. The term gaslighting gets thrown around. So as also, in addition to my English teaching, I also taught film. I don't know. Have you ever seen the 1941 Gaslight film?
I haven't, no.
That's where the term comes from. So there were 2 films. By the way, Angela Lansbury from Murder, She Wrote, she's in that movie, and she's like just a kid. This woman had like a 90-year career. Anyway, Ingrid Bergman in that movie is manipulated by this con artist husband. This movie is so old, and it's set in England, that they used to have gas lights. They didn't have electric lights. Just like you have your gas stove, when you turn it on, the flame comes on. They had that for lights. It was so dangerous. And what would happen is that if somebody went into another room and turned on the light, you would see the light flicker, and then you would know, hey, there's somebody else in the house. So like this guy was trying to make her think that the house was haunted, and, he'd sneak out of the house, then go up to the attic and turn on the light, and she'd see the lights flicker, and she'd ask the help, hey, is there somebody else in the house? No, there's nobody else in the house. And all of a sudden, and then, he would talk to her. Oh, no, you're just imagining things. He would continuously reframe the way she perceived. And we always talk about gaslighting as being manipulated in such a way, but there's a far more sinister dimension to it. And if you see the movie, you'll know what I mean. Ingrid Bergman starts to become mentally ill. She starts to doubt her own perception of reality. You could see her breaking down. And it is, you hate, by the end of that movie, you so hate this guy. I don't want to ruin it for you, but this guy has so manipulated. Every time she expressed her feelings or she made an observation, no, honey, that's not it at all. You're just tired, dear. You're just not looking at, and that's what they do to us. No, what you need to apply the volcano breath, and you need to employ all these mindfulness techniques, and you'll see. No, there are some real things going on. There are kids who are misbehaving and being disrespectful. We're not getting any administrative support. There's these devices who are putting pressure on these kids and mining them from data and robbing them of their imagination, making them think that life can only be experienced through the phone. All these things mindfulness is great. Don't get me wrong. Do your yoga, do your breathing, do your attention and all that. But that doesn't fix the problems that we're really dealing with. And when they make it all about you, when they micromanage you to give you the impression that if we could just adjust what you're doing, then everything will work out and everything will be fixed, then that's an abdication of their responsibility. And by extension, we are unable to do the jobs that we've been hired to do, and everybody suffers. But all these companies, from the people providing the Chromebooks to the platforms to all the software, they're definitely making a mint. And I think if we believe in public education at all, and if we are in fact going to be 21st century citizens, then we need to ask ourselves, is this what we want? Do we want a society that's all about competition, declaring war on things, this one-dimensional binary thinking, you're either with me or you're against me, everything turned to a competition? I mean, you look at some of these reality shows, they have cupcake contests, or, who's the best tattoo artist, who's the best singer. I mean, I don't think of it. I don't think about who is the best singer. I want singers to be different. I like Nina Simone for the way she sings. I like Frank Sinatra for the way he's. I like Stevie Wonder for the way he's. I don't make them compete. That's ridiculous. So, but we're in this mindset. Once again, this belief has us, where all of our experiences have been collapsed into this technological form of media through this device. And everything has to be reduced to something that is instant. But I'm sorry, that's not what it should be. So we have to be honest with ourselves and say, is this what we want in public education? Or do we want people to think? If we want thinkers, if we want writers, if we want genuine citizens, then this is not working. We're going to have to restructure the whole thing.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything you've said today, Mike. And it's just refreshing to, have somebody summarize everything that's wrong with education. I'm knighting you the educational philosopher of America.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an honor coming from you. Absolutely. Thank you. That's really nice. I couldn't believe you. I don't know. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and there was something about yours where every guest that you and your guests, you actually you weren't trying to be something you were not. You were just being yourselves and speaking openly. And I thought, well, I've never done this. So I'm not a social media person. I'll listen to podcasts, watch YouTube and things like that, but I'm not one to reach out. But your show was so great. And I figured, hey, if you were interested in my experience, I'm only too glad to share it with you.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. This is absolutely awesome. And audience, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Please let us know by all means if you have any questions, if you have any show ideas for the future, and if you want to interview with me, feel free to email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Thank you, audience. We'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.